So let's talk a little bit about engagement. In my experience, in Gaishke global companies, when you get to the engagement surveys, to the global engagement survey, and then you get the results, and you have the meeting in the, it's usually Singapore or Hong Kong, the sort of APAC hub, and they put up all the results, and APAC's the worst around the whole world. And then within APAC, Japan's got the lowest scores of everyone, and there's all this pressure to get the scores higher. So how have you found things that work to get the engagement higher levels in Japan?
I mean, first of all, it's trust, and I think that's a common thing. But then once you get the fundamental trust, how do you change the situation where you listen versus you actually participate? And I would say once you learn a certain level of trust, then I guess you try to engage in a cultural change, right? I think you can't do both at the same time. And so in our situation, it was essentially, we would have all hands meetings or general smaller meetings where, the leadership is the only one talking. But one interesting anecdote I would say that really happened was there was the tragic earthquake and tsunami and earthquake in the northern part of Japan several years ago. And of course we as being in Tokyo were affected by it, and our employees were affected by it. And so in order to keep operations moving, we had to basically start a daily emergency call in or actual meeting, and to discuss what the issues are, and we also even did some evacuation to the south and to keep everybody involved because not everybody could move. But so we kept on doing that, and as things calmed down, we ramped it down to twice a week, to once a week, to once a month, and then we said, let's stop it. To which the employee says, no, let's continue it, and it lasted a year, and basically they felt that they had a need because of the tragedy we had, the earthquake, and the difficulties people had thereafter. But during those sessions, people start talking about other things and business things, and it became a place where people would, we kept the tradition, changed the time to do it in the middle of the day, and it was attended by 80% of the people, which is pretty big, pretty good. And then people started actually commenting and wanted to explain their situation or their strategy, and it became not just all hands for me, but more of a town hall where people who had issues or things they wanted to discuss. So I think that was a very good step forward.
So that sort of came about by chance in a way, didn't it? Because
yes.
The earthquake, obviously, was very psychologically stressful, physically stressful for a lot of people. And certainly we were having aftershocks, large earthquakes, called aftershocks, but they're a major earthquake in their own right, 6-7 times a day for like months. So it wasn't like the earthquake finished and that was it. It was still ongoing for those of us who stayed. And so I can understand there'd be some, need for, I'm still not through that. But it's interesting how it morphed into more of a communication thing.
Yes.
What was the sort of communication pattern like for them before that?
It was one way and more focused. And if you really want to get communication, so I spent a lot of time drinking, non-communication, right? And since when I joined, I was in my late 30s, and that was kind of rare to have a shacho at that age, and so it was interesting how the younger people invited me out on their dough to go out drinking with them rather than accompany money, and so that was an interesting thing. So which means that the young people actually wanted to communicate, right? And so they communicate in a different manner. So I think every company has its own culture of communication or its blockages in communication, but you need to find, once you find that, you can start infiltrating and kind of building trust at that level, the young people talk to each other all the time. So the communication, the unofficial communication in Japanese companies is superb, I think. So if you can tap into that, make it a more corporate thing and kind of shake off this, this communication channel as a silo buster, that could also become very helpful.
Were they continuing something that had been going on with the previous president, where they'd invite them to come out and have drinks, or this is new for you?
It was new for me.
And why do you think they did that? I mean, that's quite, in a way, they're really stepping out and taking a bit of a risk in a way, aren't they?
Yeah.
What do you think was driving that?
Because I guess imagine that they heard of my reputation of being as a kind of a more international, laid-back guy, I guess. but I think what showed up at the end was, and we identified this later in some of the exercise we have, is the middle management tends to be kind of squeezed, and the middle management, the kacho area or the section heads, turned out in our cases be a large blockage point. Not the fact because they wanted to block, but I think some of them felt that there was a disconnect between the staff and the management. And this is where I would say that when we start off in, typical to manage a staff, we had 2-3 year plans, and every time we kick it off, explain it. The more we did about 4 or 5 of them, and I think the later it got more successful. I think they were all very important, but the engagement became successful later because we identified that I think the middle management was kind of stuck.
Oh.
Yeah. And not stuck particularly because of their fault. I would say there was probably the senior management issue that maybe didn't pay enough attention to that communication. Because at the senior staff meetings, we were all gung-ho. This is a great strategy. Hey, we're going to win this marketplace. And then, when we started realizing that the echo back didn't happen from the staff when we had this thing, there's a blockade somewhere. And we start looking into that, and we kind of find that clearly the middle management level were in a rut, trying to help, how they were probably not coached enough how to spread the message to their staff when they got it from the senior staff, right? At least in our case. And so we addressed that through more training, as well as more engagement. And then I think what topped it off is once you get to a certain level, then you can decide the direction for the next 5 years at the top, but you need to also engage with the staff level. I mean, it sounds obvious, but it's less obvious than do it. And then because what it means from the top staff and what it means to the daily job of the staff level is totally different. So given a very clear example, the finance people thought that it was the job of the finance accounting guys to stop making the sales guys spend too much money in entertainment. So there was a serious battle going on. This is too much for lunch, or this is too much for dinner. And what happened at the end was, long story short, was when they got together and after the top manager said we want to go here, what they had to do is because the sales guys are not there to spend money because they have family as well. They want to get the best quickly results, and then even that saying they got to go out to dinner with their customers, they're spending time away. So we need to help them and remove these barriers, and then they start developing a approval system which is much quicker than the previous one. And the previous one was blocking because of me, because I was always the one in the office to stamp the Hanko.
Oh, okay.
So they took me out of the loop, and this was actually came from the finance group, which I thought was extraordinary.
So the finance group said, okay, this bureaucratic system of getting your Hanko chop seal on the official approval process is slowing the whole thing down. Let's just take you out of it.
Yeah.
And we'll take over that accountability, which is, that's quite innovative, isn't it?
And then they're not the police, the expense police there, but they're more to help enable the salesman get more face time with the customer, I think.
Oh, yeah, that was great.
That was cool, I thought.
Yeah. And it's interesting how you talk about the middle management being the blocker. They suck up all the information coming from above, but they tend not to be very parsimonious about sending it down the line.
Yeah.
And often the why of what's going on is not transmitted. As you say, the communication issues, the why is understood at the top level, but not necessarily grasped at the bottom level.
Yes, and I think it's essentially the top issue because they haven't explained enough. Because we always say that we need to be careful on where the information goes. So I think there's a belief that we shouldn't push all the information out because there's a field of spillage. But unless you tell people what we're doing this for in understandable terms, it's never it's not going to be effective. So I think the key thing is push as much information as possible out, unless it's strictly confidential and don't mention it, right? So, and that culture, it's a cultural thing of how you treat information and how you hold yourself responsible, right? And I think one of the issues we had as a company, we had too many rules.
Oh, okay.
And at one point, there were so many corporate rules, even the senior management had no idea what the corporate rules were. And so there was an effort, even from headquarters, to reduce the number of corporate rules and basically have lighthouse ideas saying, you're supposed to help your colleague, general direction where you're going, have your compass and make your own, make sure that you don't jump off the cliff, simple rules like that, and then let the team act on itself, right? I mean, it takes time to get from a very bureaucratic state to that level, but certainly once you get to that, it's possible. And it's even possible in Japan, I would say.